Hey guys, it's Amber from NotableInk.com and I'm excited to be doing another Altenew Educator blog hop today. So we're going to be taking mod vases and using it into completely different ways. So when I look at these shapes, I could see flowers and I could see a bow tie. Here is the layering guide on the back, and then on the inspiration guide, it's going to show you how this stamp set is intended to be used. There are solid stamps, and then there's the detail stamp actually gives you like the water line in the vase, or could also just be colored detail on the vase or shading. Or of course you could do silhouettes like what you see there. But we're going to do something completely different. So I have one of the stamps here. I've lined it up and centered it on my grid mat, and then I picked it up with the grid on my stamp block. And so I'm just going to start stamping. I used the grid on my mat to line up the stamp for the first one, and then for the rest of them I'm really just going right in the middle of the first stamp. For the one that's going directly across from it, I'm just lining it up with the tip of the one right before it. So I'm not even using, after the first stamp I stopped using the grid and just lined it up with what I had already stamped. Now I'm going to move on to another stamp, and this time I'm going to stamp in between the ones that I already have. And same thing, I'm going to line up the tips of the vases, and then I'll go halfway in between those and I'll line it up with the tip of that vase, and I'll just keep going in that same pattern. It just makes it really easy to do that. Now in Zentangle, when you overlap patterns, you get what they call a meta pattern, and that's what you can see has happened in the middle here. So basically it created a whole nother flower in the center. So it's almost like we have 3 layers of flower here. So now I have a micron PN pen, and this is a little bit thicker than an 01 pen. I think technically it is supposed to be an 01 size, but it's always comes out a little bit thicker than that. I like these pens because you can't crush the tip. It's a plastic nib. So I basically just outlined the shape that I had there. Now, the stamped images that I have here, the lighter ones in the back, they didn't line up with the lines I had already drew in, but it's so light you can't tell. So I just went ahead and made the lines line up with the flowers that I had already drawn, because that's just going to look better, right? Now, don't panic. I made a mistake there, but we're going to fix it later. So if you make a mistake with your pen, do not panic. Just leave it alone until you go do something else, until you calm down a little bit, and then you can go back to it, and we're going to camouflage that. So here I'm doing a pattern. It's similar to Innopod. You basically just put 2 lines, fill it in with some circles, and then I'm just oraing the lines and kind of curving a line around it. So it almost looks like a pea pod. And then basically I'm just going to create a fold in the tips of these petals, and that's what I'm going to use to mask that mistake that I made with that stray line. Like, you can't even see it anymore. Here I'm just going to add some lines to these petals. Now I'm imagining that these lighter petals in the back are behind, but the darker petals in the front are transparent. So I've broken up my line as I get to that darker petal. I hope that makes sense. I don't know. I just thought it was kind of a nicer design element rather than just having a straight line all the way down. Now I have the rose petal Altenew artist markers, and I'm just coloring in these areas. These markers were already on my desk from the butterfly card I did from the last standalone die and stencil release. I'll link to that up in the right hand corner. That's like my favorite card. I love it. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. So I am just putting the darkest color at the base and then going from darkest to light all the way out at the tip. I do 2 layers of this because it wasn't dark enough for me the first go around. So same thing, I'll go darkest to lightest, and I'm just blending it out all the way to the tip. The other colors that I had for that project were some yellows, so I'm going to pull those out next. So here I have Warm Sunshine and Buttercream are these 2 yellows. And then I think I also pull out Paper Bag because this just wasn't dark enough. So I pull out whatever the next darkest color is in that set. And this is the sun. I'm pretty sure it's called Summer Afternoon. I'll have the correct names of everything. Everything will be linked down below. So I'm just blending this out, and I'm not going to show all of the coloring because it's the same for each petal. But here I did just want to show you this one because this is where I darken it up and add a deeper brown to the recesses. And then so I blend that out. Even that's not dark enough, so I add an even darker color here. Don't be afraid to use your dark markers. That's what's going to add your dimension. If you don't go dark enough, it's not going to look like it has dimension. I could have even gone darker here. Here I have a warm gray marker, and I'm just adding some shadow behind that first layer of flower. And then I'm just going to blend that out with one of the lighter warm gray markers. And I'm also going to add some shadow around the yellow petals as well. So that'll go all the way around. And then around the tips. For the little circles, I don't think I have it on film, but I made those a teal color. So I took the seashore markers and shaded the little orbs. Lastly, I stacked a few of the Bold Greetings Hello die cut with white cardstock, and that was it. I didn't embellish the card at all. Next up, we're going to go more simple. We're taking one of the vases and we're going to create bow ties. So I am using Dewdrops ink and Sunray ink. I thought that would be a nice color palette. And I'm not using the grid at all. I'm just kind of, what I'm doing to figure out my pattern is I'm starting the next one at the halfway point. So where those two bow ties meet. And to create the center of the bow tie so that it's darker, I'm just overlapping that little top of the vase, and that just overlaps and creates a darker square. So for my next one, you can see I'm going to start the end of the bow tie at the center of the bow tie above it. And that's how I'm just setting up my pattern. It's, if they're not evenly spaced, I'm totally okay with that. Anytime you want to do a background pattern, you want to make sure that it goes off the page so it looks like a cohesive design, like a pattern paper. And you want to make sure that you're alternating your ink so that you've got a little bit more interest. And that's it. That's like a really quick background, you guys. So here I have used the fine frame square dies, and I've cut some cardstock, the pale gray cardstock. I've cut the fine frame die, and then I used one of the smaller fine frames and used the center of that die, popped that up on some fun foam, and then for the dad, I stacked some white cardstock die cuts from these simple alphabet dies, spelled dad, and then I used a sub-sentiment and white heat emboss that. I'm just using the ruler to square up my fine frame and make sure that those are straight before I get them completely adhered down. There's the finished card. I didn't even add any embellishments. I just left it clean and simple. I hope you guys enjoyed these projects today and they weren't too far outside of the box for you. We invest a lot into our art and our craft, and I think it's important for us to get the most out of the supplies that we possibly can. So I encourage you to look at your supplies and think about using them in different and new ways. Be sure to visit my crafty friends on the blog hop, and if there's a video, be sure you like, subscribe, and share that video with your friends. It's the best way to help us out so that we can bring more content to you guys and so that we get a larger reach. Thanks so much for stopping by, and I'll see you real soon with more inspiration.